Okay, I think we'll get started.
That's a quick
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Coming in, but.
I'm asking a quick
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome. I'm glad you could make it to the NASA Human Exploration Research Analog Experiment presentation. That's going to be given here by Professor Addante. He is one of our very own associate professors of psychology. He spent the last summer preparing for this particular mission in space. And it's a simulated mission of which he's going to explain to you, give you all the details, give you all the wonderful pictures, and we've got some other things here for you. And I think there's going to be a Q&A afterwards, or something similar too, where we have some posters, a couple of posters that he can autograph for you if you're interested. So without further ado, I'll give you Professor Addante.
Hi everybody, thank you very much. That was wonderful. I'm really excited to be here with you guys, so thank you guys very much for coming out and joining us. I have some exciting stories I want to share with you from a really cool summer experiment that we did at NASA at Johnson Space Center from a project called the Human Exploration Research Analog. So you'll hear me refer to that basically as HERA. That's what we call it. And so I'm very proud to be able to represent us from CSUSB there. And what I kind of had planned for today was to basically do a little show and tell, very casual, basically share a lot of pictures, because we did a lot of stuff. So I have a lot of pictures. I'm really excited to share them with you guys, and hopefully they can provide sort of a picture story of a lot of the science, engineering, operations, and otherwise teamwork and excitement that we got the privilege and honor of working on this summer. So I'll kind of dive right in, and first want to thank the Pfau Library and everything Robbie and Pat have done to help promote the talk. So thank you guys very much for that, and thank you guys for your time and attention. If I move a little quick, flag me down, ask me some questions if you need to, but if not, I'm going to try intentionally to kind of move quickly so that we can kind of cover all the cool stuff that happened, and then we can talk about it maybe a little bit more at the end. So the outline that I hope to move through is basically kind of summarizing first an introduction of what is this project called HERA. What is this mission that we took to this asteroid named Geographos? And so it's a simulated mission, as was mentioned earlier, which means that we didn't actually leave Earth, but before we do such interplanetary travel, we want to make sure that we get everything dialed in just right on the science, the technology, the engineering, the systems. And so that involves simulating those missions, practicing the same way that your airline pilots practice in a simulator before they take off on your flights, and mostly how we would simulate just about anything important, because you practice before you play, whether that's music, sports, what have you. And this is one of those critical experiments and studies that have been conducted so that we can properly understand the psychology factors, the teamwork factors, those interpersonal dynamics that are going to interact with our technology in order to make sure that we have a successful mission when those astronauts do get the opportunity to go land on another planet. So we'll talk a little bit about what HERA is. I'll describe a little bit about the application process that we went through and sort of how we got there as crew members. And then, of course, we'll dive headlong into the science and the training involved. So we have about a 2-week training period, and then I'll spend a lot of time flipping through a lot of cool pictures from the mission, actually pictures from the inside of this space capsule that you might recognize has a lot of similarities with that that you might see from the movie The Martian, because The Martian producers and staff actually drew their inspiration from the movie for those equipment from our habitat. And you'll hear me call it the HAB, I think, as you might recall if any of you guys saw The Martian as well. So, and of course, I'll try to finish off with a couple lessons and things that we learned from it as crew members, and try to encourage you guys to continue picking up that baton to take the next steps in furthering our science and exploration, not just of our universe, but here on Earth as well, because understanding how we live and interact on Earth is going to be, the obvious core, essential part to allowing us to take those next steps off of Earth. So that'll be largely you guys in that generation leading us forward. So I want to hopefully continue on with that inspiration for you guys to help lead us forward, because we're going to need everyone's help to do this pretty massive endeavor that we're trying to do across our galaxy. So with that, I'll sort of introduce a little bit about what we have. There will be lots of pictures I'll show, so I'll move quickly through some of them, and we'll cover a lot of the teamwork in science that will hopefully lead us to Mars, long-term stays on the moon, asteroids, and all sorts of other fun places. So, what is HERA? So, it's basically an abbreviation for the Human Exploration Research Analog. And so, what that means is it's one of the biggest psychology studies that you can imagine of multi-year study of extremely focused research studies to understand what we call isolated, confined, or extreme environments. So it's abbreviated as ICE. So in order to understand what are the factors that are going to govern astronauts on their explorations of our universe, we've got to understand the context in which they're living. And these are context of extreme environments in outer space. They're very isolated, which means imagine taking a summer road trip with 4 of your closest friends or family who you actually love and like, right? But you can't leave that car all summer. Even for bathroom breaks or gas stations or whatnot, right? Even the people you really like, let alone just people you work with, right? So we really want to understand those psychological elements. We really want to understand these human elements that's going to help to be important parts of our research analog. So that's kind of what this is. It's a big psychology, neuroscience, biological factors study, and it's a really impressive endeavor that the scientists at NASA have undertaken in a pretty impressive and bold fashion, because if some of you guys are psychology majors in the room, it's very difficult to design and effectively run these studies. So it's very, very impressive, and it was an honor to be associated with it. So basically they call it an Earth-based facility where human research is conducted using scenarios and environments analogous to space. So that's kind of what this analog refers to up here. So it's an part of this word analogous. So when we have analogs to study these factors that will govern astronaut exploration in space, you'll see some analogs in Antarctica. There's one called NEMO that's underwater in the Florida Keys. There's some in volcanoes, habitats in Hawaii. There's one in, I think it's a 500-day stay in Russia. So there's lots of these analog studies, but HERA is one of the really special ones because it's isolated and confined. It's actually specifically designed to run a ton of scientific studies on us, who are the guinea pigs. So, now, why are we doing this, right? I kind of alluded to this earlier. So the long-term plan for space is to take us to a place like Mars. From our starting point here, our beautiful, lovely planet Earth. And so this is actually a diagram that was taken from Rocket Park, which is a place at Johnson Space Center down in Houston, Texas. And this is NASA's kind of roadmap. So I'll sort of parcelate it for you and explain why we need to do this HERA project, why we're doing these big psychology studies. So we're starting here, number 1, where this star is here on Earth, right? Where we want to get to is number 2, here on Mars. However, we'd also like to come home. That's kind of important, right? You guys remember the moon shot in the 60s? John F. Kennedy gave us the charge to not just land men on the moon, but to bring them home safely. That's kind of important. Now, in order to accomplish these steps 1, 2, and 3, leaving Earth, going to Mars, and coming home successfully, your team must survive each other for 3 years in a really, really tight, confined space, right? And this is a challenge, right? We are in isolation. You're not necessarily going to have freedom to communicate with your family or friends or mission control for operations system support. We've got to be able to rely on each other, but also maintain some sanity of your own in isolation too. So it's really important factors, because if we don't develop these systems, right, then we put the mission at risk. If we don't have a better understanding of how we're going to handle on this trip, if there's a failure of cognition or stress or sleep deprivation or something like that, we can make mistakes that could lead to catastrophic outcomes. So it's a really important part of getting here, because we already have. We've landed on Mars. We have the science and engineering. We've got the rockets. It's us that we got to make sure is dialed in. And so, as a psychology professor here, that was something that really resonated And so in HERA, we test these systems needed for deep space missions. So we focus heavily on teamwork, teamwork, and teamwork. A lot of studies here on team dynamics, group cohesion, really important parts about getting along with each other. We're going to study nutrition and exercise, sleep, rest, things that we might take for granted regularly in everyday life, which have these nefarious effects when extended in chronic situations. So we actually had a sleep deprivation study. We'll study heavily on the psychology and neuroscience of these experiences, medicine, microbiology, botany. So we were growing plants, much like you might have seen in The Martian. We were growing bacteria that we were studying on plates, like you might see in the biology department here. And of course, we are having doctors study different forms of medicine that we are able to explore, like telemedicine, in ways that people would have to be treated in those situations. And of course, we engage in various different elements of engineering and maintenance of the craft, which is pretty cool because you got to take care of your equipment if you want, like, for it to take care of you. We also got to some really cool flight simulators. So I fly with the Civil Air Patrol, and that was a lot of fun. So we got to do some flight simulators of lunar landers, of asteroid explorations, and do a lot of spacewalks through virtual reality and explore these asteroids and places. That was just the coolest thing, like being an adult at summer space camp and just a dream of a scientist and a kid and everything else mixed in. So it was a ton of fun. So I'll cover all of that stuff and more, which is why I said I have a lot of pictures for you. Sound like a good plan? All right. So, who are we? Well, basically, introduce you to our crew. And so we're a 4-person crew. We're commanded by Paul Haugen, who is a doctor at NASA. He is a PhD in biomedical engineering. He's a T-38, which is a really fast, awesome fighter plane trainer at Ellington Field. So he flies those trainer jets with the astronauts, and he does biomedical engineering for the Human Exploration Research Program at NASA as well. And all around, just an awesome guy. He was our commander for the mission, and we also had a flight engineer, Reinhold. And so his day job is sort of out here in the western side of the country. He works at Arizona State, and he is an engineer on what's called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. So what that is, it's a satellite that rotates and orbits the moon and takes thousands and thousands of digital photographs of the moon's surface. And then he goes in as an engineer and does all the math that digitally reconstructs those images, and he's able to understand and quantify the turnover rate of what you would call, maybe not soil, but the lunar surface. And so that's really important because it turns over, they thought, every couple 100,000 years based on asteroid impacts and it moving around. And turns out with it, he made a discovery that was published in one of the top journals in the world that showed it actually happening much faster every about 50,000 years, which has a really big impact because it lets us know when are Neil Armstrong's footprints going to disappear. And he's seen them with his cameras, which is really cool. So we also have Dr. Shelley Cazares, who is actually a native up here outside of Bakersfield in Central California. That was where she grew up. She went on and did her undergraduate degree in engineering at MIT, a PhD in engineering from Oxford, and is now an engineer at the Pentagon. So pretty high level stuff. She's really fantastic, very smart, and it was an honor for me to be able to join them. And really, they constituted what I would say is the best teammates anyone can ask for. And I'll kind of share a little bit about that as we move along and talk about the team, beyond the team as well, because we might be sort of the tip of the spear, but really there's a huge, huge broader team at work. And we were honored to be a small part of that at NASA, but we came and we left. And we went about our separate ways, but there is a bigger team that is there every day for years and years and years, really working to get this done, from the administrative to the engineering sides and everything else in between. And Mission Control and their incredible staff were just truly amazing. And I'll kind of return to some examples about that we got to exemplify through the time. And so our mission was to travel to an asteroid named Geographos, which is actually a real asteroid. And we were sealed in this capsule that I'll get into in a little minute. Our job was to land, explore, and collect these asteroid samples, then, of course, return safely home. So the mission profile goes from simulated launch, where we actually do all the launch simulations, and then we see Earth disappear in our rearview mirror. We pass the moon. We go all the way out for about 23 days out to the asteroid, take care of business, on the asteroid, and then circle back and make another 23-day trek home. We have comm delays along the way, because as you go further and further from the Earth, it takes longer and longer to talk to the Earth back and forth. So it might take 5 minutes to send a message, then they say something, and it takes 5 minutes to come back. So you really have to be thoughtful about using your time wisely. So very, very cool mission profile. There's 45 days of confinement. The upside to that, of course, was that we didn't have any internet, no telephone, no Snapchat, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram, and I found that to be a really nice relief. But we understand that that might be a challenge for some other people. But the downside, of course, is that we're isolated from our loved ones, from sunshine, the outside world, and of course, sleep. So we got to sleep on a very limited profile. I'll kind of cover that a little bit. And of course, our task was to live as astronauts would live on a Mars trip. So they wanted us to be ourselves, but to remember that we were in essentially a character, to do our best to represent how that might be happening, so they could study that scientifically. And they could both conduct scientific experiments on us, and we would be conducting other experiments on other materials and tasks. And we were those guinea pigs that had the science done on us. So how we got there, basically you send an email to this email address, jsc-hera@mail.nasa.gov. And any of you guys can do that, that's all you do. Send an email with your resume, say, I'd like to do this, check me out. I think that you need a college degree or possibly a master's, but around 29 or 30-ish and above, send it in. Can't hurt. That's what I thought. Sent it in, and you know what happened? Got rejected. Oh yeah. Sent my resume in. About a month or two later, I get a call, and they say, hey, we're so-and-so from NASA, and we got your resume here, and it looks really, really good. We just want to let you know that you're rejected, and there's no way you will ever do this study. Yeah. It's kind of a rough phone call, right? And so I said, well, sure, thanks, I suppose, and what seems to be the problem, Bev? And she said that because this is a psychology study, and I happen to be a psychologist, and I actually study a lot of the things that the mission itself is designed to study, learning, memory, cognition, that there was a little bit too much overlap to prevent sort of a naive subject. And so I kind of joked with her a little bit on the phone. I said, there might be a misunderstanding. I'm not nearly as smart as my resume seems. You can ask any of my friends or students, and they'll vouch for that. And so they must have done that, and then we talked for a little while, and we said, well, maybe we'll keep you on as a backup just in case we end up needing some extra hands later on down the road. And so that's kind of what happened. We went through lots of screening, tons of medical tests, tons of physical tests, tons of psychological tests, because you want to make sure that you screen the people who you're going to lock into a container with 4 other people for the summer. You want to make sure that you screen them a little bit up here, just kind of know a little bit about what's going on. And in the meantime, you just practice a lot of patience, because there is a lot of downtime. And you don't hear back, you don't know what's happening, because there's a lot of gears and moving parts happening behind the scenes. They bring you out for an interview, you try out some cool stuff, you get to go all over Johnson Space Center, you try out the virtual reality system, they run you up and down a bunch of roller coasters, see if you get sick. And in the meantime, you just go about your business. So for me, that's at Cal State here, I just wanted to focus on working hard in school, practice good teamwork skills, practice good science. So this is kind of me at actually one of the medical labs, probably getting blood drawn or doing something. Practice flying during the time, practice some good teamwork and science together in the laboratory. So this is here at Cal State. Some of you guys might have been down there in the lab, seen some EEG recordings that we do, and practice some good sort of leadership and teamwork, both together in the lab, but also teaching in classes as well. So these are kind of a snapshot of what we do here at Cal State. These are some of the brainwaves that you might have recorded from an EEG cap like this, and that's exactly what this would be. This is actually for infants, so this is a little baby EEG cap. But you can check this out later on if you want. And that's kind of what we do. So that was in the meantime. You apply, and then you wait. And what ended up happening is NASA called while I happened to have been underwater in the Caribbean on a very gracious trip supported by professors across borders here at Cal State San Bernardino, where I was out doing research in 3 different things. One, I was doing research on conservation biology for the endangered leatherback turtles, which is in a very remote beach in Grenada, where we can do a lot of that type of biological research. 2, I was out there actually doing a lot of groundwork, trying to set up some hopeful opportunities for all you guys to get involved with a very similar trip through a study abroad program at St. George Medical School down there. And so I was also scuba diving to help actually improve my qualifications for opportunities like this, because the asteroid exploration virtual reality, as we'll see, has a lot of analogs to scuba diving. I was underwater, what they call ad astra per aqua, so to the stars by way of water. And they called, and it ended up being a good opportunity because by virtue of that, it was good practice. These are those endangered weatherback turtles, thanks to friends across borders. We had to do that under sleep deprivation because they only come out at night. So very good practice for sleep dev study. The deep compression diving was pretty good practice for the virtual reality. So I got to go about 150 feet down. I was about here when I got the email. Of course, I didn't have my phone on me at the time, but when we came up on the surface, NASA called and said, hey, can you make it? And then we were living on a ship. So we practiced living in tight quarters, thinking about other people first to make sure we were good teammates, because we're all in this boat together and we got to get along. So it's pretty good practice, and we got to build those teamwork skills, doing work that your teammates can trust, having a good attitude while you're uncomfortable, while you're cranky, not getting any sleep. We're living in a tiny, cramped little quarter with no air conditioning, bouncing up and down in the waves, and still having to get along with people. Really good practice, and we drew upon that a lot in the mission. Now, the thing I would mention too about this experience was learning to give yourself as backup for the team. Putting others first was really important because when they called here, I mentioned I was rejected first, right? They called and said, we'd like to have you come, but you didn't make the cut. Can you come as a backup? And so I was a little, my ego took a shot there for a second, right? Like, you want to be on the starting varsity team, and I was used to that. But what I learned is, check your ego at the door, have a great attitude. This is a really good opportunity, not just for me, but it's a great opportunity to serve other people on a bigger mission, on a bigger team, with a much better goal than anything we could aim for personally. And so I adjusted that attitude right off the bat and embraced that. So I went there as a backup after being a reject. And so showed up there about 10 days later. Grenada, can you make it to Houston in 10 days? Sure. This is 0600 hours. That's Rocket Park. The rockets coming in. You're so inspired driving in. It's really, really cool. And you're just excited, right? And you're like an adult going to summer camp. This is our first day walking in, reporting for duty. You walk into this huge warehouse. This is our other team members. And on the door it says Human Spaceflight Hardware Facility. Caution, authorized personnel only. And it just seemed like the coolest thing in the world. It was fun. It was exciting. And we're showing up to work. Now this is kind of inside this habitat. And inside there is our habitat. So I'll give you a little bit of tour. This is the hab of the hab. And we'll kind of see our training center. So as we move through here, I'll kind of orient you to what our overall goal is, right? So this is, you can kind of see in the background, this is our habitat. But where that fits in the big picture of space exploration, right, doesn't exactly look like a rocket. But the rockets that we'll have will kind of look like this, right? So this is a mock-up of, Boeing actually made this, one of the contractors that are going to build a lot of the rocketry and engineering and equipment that we'll be using. And so you can see everything is kind of modularized. Very similar to how the Apollo program was, modules on a rocket, or the International Space Station would go up in modules. And so these are little modules, and in one of these, or two of these, we're going to have parts put together that will live in, right? So that's kind of what we'll look for. They might circle a moon or an asteroid, and they might even grab a sample from an asteroid and try to return it back to Earth, these artist renderings. And you're going to have these little modular units. And you can see that they'll kind of fit in this circular side, right? So they can be blasted off and add on top of each other. So you have like one floor, a second floor, and maybe a third one. And that's exactly what we see in our hab here. So you have one floor here. We have a second floor that comes up to about here. And up on top is a third floor, which is our bunks. And so I'll kind of we'll keep moving in greater detail, and we'll kind of take a little tour of our home away from home here. And so that's kind of what it is. You can see on the right, you can start to see the word that says hygiene module. It's where you get to go to the bathroom and shower and brush your teeth and all that good stuff that make you a really good teammate. Because, make sure you don't want to be the teammate that doesn't brush their teeth, right? Or just take a shower. That's a really important point. And then we have another little section here, which is our airlock, where we simulate doing our spacewalks. And so here I'll sort of start walking through our training phase. It's about a 2-week program, very intense training. We get up and down this sort of fire escape ladder from the second story. And this is this whole hab had been used out in the desert in earlier studies. So it's modular, you can move it out, and they had all these extra rovers. And here's where we do a lot of our briefings and trainings. So these are Commander Hodgkin and Shelley practicing some exercise physiology masks, making sure we're learning how to fit them right, that we're going to be tested on, because we do a lot of exercise stuff as well. And I'm going too fast. Okay, I'm getting excited, so I'm going to start talking about all that stuff. So, what's really cool is in the background, right, they set it up so it looks like you're on the moon surface looking back at the moon and Mars, and that makes it a lot of fun. So, as we start training, 2 rigorous weeks, made sure I kept a little journal. I found a book there that said "Make It Happen" on the cover. Figured that's got to be the perfect one. Easy $9. Scored that one. Started keeping a log from day one, and we worked so hard. I actually, during training, I had the misfortune of even ripping my pants right down the seam. So we literally worked our butts off, and my great teammates neglected to mention that to me, and I had to discover that myself at the end of the day when I settled back into the hotel, so thanks guys. Anyway, so start these 2 rigorous weeks. One of the really cool things about it, right, we're doing science, technology, engineering, all this cool stuff. I was learning for 4. So everybody had to learn their one position in a pretty intense 2 weeks, but as a backup, I had to be ready to step in for anyone at any time, like a backup quarterback, but a backup for any position on the team. So it was kind of intense and pretty exhausting because I had to learn everybody's position, how to fly, how to do the engineering, how to do the mission specialist. And so I was pretty tired, as you can see, and getting by in the seat of my pants. Anyways, so what was cool is that day 1 of our training, as we're going through, we saw it's 0600 hours going through Rocket Park, happened to be the anniversary of the landing on the moon. So that was really, really special, and it was also very inspiring and humbling to us to be there on site. And you can see this is the control room that landed those men on the moon. And this is how it was. You might recognize it from the Apollo 13 movie or other documentaries. This is really it. And that was special because it really humbled us to understand the tiny little baby speck of a contribution we were making to a much larger program that's, of an extraordinarily higher magnitude. So that was really cool. Up here is all the mission plaques, all the missions that have been commanded in here, and to see that history where they celebrated that historic step on the moon was pretty incredible and very humbling. And if you see this flag over there, that's what we were under. This flag was actually returned from the moon, which is really, really cool. So, very special day 1. As we move along, here's a bunch of the training we did. We mentioned some exercise physiology. We all got to pretend to be Bane from Batman. We put on the mask, and we would ride a bicycle, stationary bike, do VO2 max studies, cool stuff like that. Other stuff we got to do, I know we got some biologists in the room. Did a lot of DNA sampling. We got to do DNA replication. We had a mini PCR kit, so polymerase chain reaction. For you guys who might not be biology majors, we were able to replicate DNA just like they were doing on the space station, which is really, really cool. So here, Shelley's learning how to pipette those different DNA samples, and they'll irradiate them in this little container. Reinhold here is practicing collecting some bacterial samples that we'll measure throughout the mission. And here Shelley is instructing Commander Hodgkin on the finer elements of the techniques that she developed in the training. So we all trained on different things and helped each other learn. Part of good teamwork. All right. We also did part of my favorite. I'm a psychologist and neuroscientist here at CSUSB. And so one of my favorite days during training was what I call the Neuroscience Triathlon, because we got to do 3 major techniques in neuroscience and all in one day. And I've been doing neuroscience for 15 years. I've never done that before in one day. So what we did is we got to do EEG, as you can see this big old picture here, which is electrodes on the head, right? Measure brain activity, much like this cap would hold electrodes on the head. And we also got to have our brain scanned, so you can create these wonderful 3-dimensional structural images of the brain. It's actually yours truly there. Kind of see that profile. Okay. And so, and what was really cool is I actually wore my Mars socks in the MRI scanner. So if you haven't picked it up, I'm a really big nerd, really big science dork, and that was really cool for me. So to have an interest in space, and I did my postdoc at MRI measurements. That was a lot of fun. And we did another measurement called functional near-infrared spectroscopy, which is a way of measuring blood flow in the frontal cortex. And here we actually measure that in the frontal cortex here while we're controlling the Canada arm. Simulated, of course, but it's the exact replica. And I'll show some pictures of that as we get deeper in the mission. But that was a really cool day. Near and dear to my heart. Growing up as a kid in college and grad school, doing all this neuroscience, I never in a million years thought I'd be doing that at NASA in that capacity, especially all in one day. Super, super cool. You never know what your college training is going to end up leading you towards, and man, that was really special. So, other cool things we got to do, really special stuff. There's a debriefing from the International Space Station crew that had just returned from space. So a bunch of awards they give to the astronauts, and particularly the broader support crew of Mission Control, who kept those astronauts alive and safe during their mission. So I was just a face in the crowd all the way back here, right, to take this picture. But what was really cool is I saw these Russian cosmonauts who were part of our international team. They actually, Andrei Borisenko is this same cosmonaut there who happened to share our hotel. So I bumped into him that night afterwards. I've been practicing a little bit of Russian. I said, "Я изучаю русский язык от прикуда немножко," and we were able to make friends. He spoke great English, which really helped me out a lot. And he was so generous, we traded mission patches. So this is a mission patch from his mission number 28 to the International Space Station, which was the 50-year anniversary of the historic first men in space. The Russian Yuri Gagarin, so this is Cyrillic for Gagarin, and Alan Shepard, our American. So he was on that mission, commemorating that 50 years, and he gave me a copy of that, and we traded some patches with him too. So that was really cool. We got to practice keeping up international goodwill and relations, and when we came back, I actually got a letter back from him where he signed a picture that we took, sent me a signed picture of him as a Russian cosmonaut, and it came marked in Cyrillic that says from Star City, Russia, which is where they launch, their cosmonauts are based from, Roscosmos, and it says in Russian, male of pilots and astronauts. So really special day, and I got this about a month ago, and it was really, really, really special night when I came home from work. So keep those international relations going. It was pretty cool. Got to collude with the Russians. So that was fun. Now, right before we were about to ingress, now I was the replacement crew, I got the call that said, we had something come up, we need to replace one of the crew members, and I was asked if I could step in. So now I went from NASA reject to being asked to be a backup, having to check your ego, right? Learn to serve the greater purpose of the team, help support them, and now being asked to actually step in. And it's pretty exciting. But I had to really ramp things up now because I had to cram extra stuff in. And so I went from screening, right, being rejected, being selected. Now I get to at least come on in and take a look around. And now is actually now added as mission crew. So one of the things that kind of helped me remember, I like sharing with people, is the kind of key ideas to keep trying, keep smiling, keep a positive attitude. Even if you feel slighted, even if your ego, is crying a few tears every now and then on the inside emotionally, right? Keep that positive attitude and really embrace that service leadership, putting the team first. What can we do to serve others? Is always going to be a good solution to whatever is going on, and will certainly help to foster a better element. And we were able to integrate as a team pretty seamlessly from that. So now it's getting real. I'm excited. I get to take my patches out from the little plastic wrappings and everything, and we start getting these things in the mail and get our suits, and everything's getting so exciting, but it's so fast-paced. We're barely sleeping. And this is kind of the same sort of point that I wanted to share, right? Be a good team player, check that ego. This is a little cartoon my college made when they kind of covered the story. So, it's a good reminder that at the end of the day, we're kind of cartoons of ourselves. Don't take yourself too seriously. Put the other team first and serve those other people as well as you can. And so as we move forward, we kind of started our ingress. So ingress is basically our final countdown. A little ceremony. This is the flight analogs director, Lisa Spence, and she is sort of announcing us to a big NASA crowd that was there, family, friends, workers at NASA, some cake. Alcohol is not allowed on site at NASA, so we have some very delicious sparkling grape juice. We see you even have a clock counting down here. It's 5 minutes and 41 seconds. So as we're doing that, we start getting walked out, and if you want to see what it was, this was really cool. How many of you guys like 80s music? Yes, now we know we got a good crowd here. Okay, so I love 80s music. I was a wrestler in high school, and I would train to, good intense music all the time. Well, we got to do a walkout here, right? Our presentation for our ingress, and they jammed on our final countdown. You know what they played? Final countdown. Of course. Yeah. So we're going to do about a minute presentation. Sandy Self, he's one of the directors of the program. And we'll do like a Navy transfer of command from him to the commander of our vessel, launching. So we really simulate this psychological experience of a launch. There's my brother. He wouldn't miss a chance to see his brother get locked up. Yeah, you guys gotta go. You gotta get in there. So there we went. And so the hatch is sealed, right? And now the mission begins. We're on to the asteroid Geographos, and one thing that was really cool is you can see we didn't have windows, but we had LCD screens that was mocked up windows. So it actually showed stars moving like your screensaver. So it looked like you're traveling through space. But here we're on Earth. We're so close you can see Earth. But as it and the whole thing rumbles and shakes, and they have a countdown, and you're interacting and doing your checklists, and it's rumbling and it's blasting off, and you see they have film taken from the spaceships launching on the shuttles, showing Earth getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it really helped to put you in that psychological mindset, because remember, this is a psychological study of confinement, being away from your family, your friends, mission control. You need to get that excitement of the first launch, and then it tapers down to a little bit of a dead as time goes on. Now, in confinement, as you might imagine, this is a psychological challenge, right? Things start to happen, okay? Everyone has their limit, their breaking point, right? Part of the study's ambition is what we need to study, right? So you never know, that isolation starts to get to you a little bit. The mind can play these weird tricks on you. We found our limit, and we ended up finding a new crew member. Wilson. Near and dear, cherished member of our team. We have brought him on board along with us, and he kind of helped keep us sane by thinking of those nice beaches we might find once we return back to Earth. And so he was this cherished member of our team. We had a little flight suit for him. He helped us out during training. We brought him in during our ingress there with Reinhold, and he helped us during some of our communications. Sometimes, you'd have some disagreements with him on occasion. He has his own, he'll speak his own mind right back to you. And he was there on egress with us as well. So he helped us, just like Yoda there, with some wisdom. He's very patient among us, and he even was there with us while we did our science. So you'll see him in some of our pictures, and he was a very cherished member, so we lovingly refer to him as our fifth crew member. Now, here's a little tour inside the HERA habitat, our HAB. we have this elevator that will actually, it's on controls, it'll rise, but it has a ladder, so most of the time you're just climbing up and down. But if you need to lift something heavy back and forth, you can ride this ladder, although generally not all four of us together, that got a little too cozy. And we had a long trip, right? So you don't always want to ride 4 in the elevator together a long way in. And, so we'll take a little bit of a look around. Now this is our first level. Here's that elevator. Here's some of our switches that'll rise it or bring it down. You see over here we have a medical station. There's a microscope. We have a glove box here, which is where you put your hands in and work with some simulated asteroid samples. And over here is our flight simulator station. So we'll take some closer looks. Again, we have our glove box here. That's our medical station for biosciences. And then this is our flight simulator. So you have 3 monitors here and 3 here. This is for the pilot. This is for the co-pilot. And then over here we have a 3D printer. And we also have the simulator for what will be the Canadarm. And we'll get to that with some other better shots in a little bit. So we mentioned the hygiene module is also on the first floor. That's, tend to get a lot of questions about that. It's very well ventilated, as you might imagine. Very useful engineering feature during a confinement mission, especially for the toilet. The toilet is pretty much normal, works just like all the other ones, so thank you, NASA, for hooking us up with a normally functioning toilet. We had a sink, a little shower. Now the laundry itself, we had to kind of go old school, and you would wash it in a little, essentially a little dish pan. So you kind of had to wash it by hand, dry it up. You'd have, different days of the week, everybody's laundry, all their unmentionables hanging out all over the capsule, drying off by the vents. So you get to know each other really well. You got to be really a good family together. And we sort of keep some storage for the crew supplies. And it was one of the best important parts about being a good teammate, right? Keep this area clean, right? And so it's something we were very committed to for obvious reasons. You want to make sure that you're not the person who leaves it dirty behind you. And I think that's a pretty good lesson to take forward into the world, because a lot of gas stations can really learn from this. Don't you think? Indeed, most of us. So that was the hygiene module, and that's kind of what it looks like. There's your normal toilet. This is walking in. You see the cold and hot water hookups into the shower. This is our sink, and then here would be our shower. It's a very nice little refuge. Now you're on camera 24/7, like a reality show, but this is your refuge from the camera.
Wow.
Yeah. So imagine if your boss had to watch you for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except for going to the bathroom, but watch you get out of bed, put your PJs on, get kind of cranky in the morning or at night, right? So Commander Hoggen, he works for NASA. Very brave of him to go and undertake this mission. He had all of his coworkers and bosses watching him, all day, every day, right? So it's pretty impressive. Now we also have the airlock on level 1. This is that side area. That's where we're going to do some of our asteroid collections and our virtual reality. So I'll jump into that in just a minute. But we also conduct our private calls. We do weekly psychology calls with the psychologists, make sure that each of us are doing pretty good, resolve any conflicts that might be occurring, as well as any doctor calls or anything like that. And this is a really good spot where we like to dry our laundry because it's very well ventilated. So that's kind of where that happened. And then it's also where we did a lot of our technology and engineering stuff. So I know we have some physics majors in the room and some engineering interests. We got to do some really cool stuff. We got to build robots. These are rovers that we got to build. So we had, our days were not just kind of like hanging out. We were very busy. 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. every single day. All your time is scheduled, even your free time. And all your tasks, you might have a task because you're trying to replicate the experience psychologically and physically of being an astronaut, getting that exhaustion of having nothing but constant tasks. Mission control's demanding that you do all that, some of which fail. So they're designed to fail so that you mimic that frustration that they have on the International Space Station, right? So imagine, you guys remember the old movie Office Space, right? The guy complains, he's like, I've got 9 bosses telling me how to do my job. He says, 9? Yeah, 9. So when you're on the International Space Station, you've got all these scientists on the ground and mission controllers on the ground. They all want you to do a ton of jobs. and they're all fighting for your time. And you get frustrated because it doesn't always work, and then you feel like you get in trouble sometimes. Maybe you didn't do the job right or something like that. You really got to get that right. So sometimes this stuff didn't always work. They need to replicate that psychological stress. We had a 3D printer, so you can't leave the capsule, but you can make stuff. So we got to learn some pretty cool 3D printing. This is one of the rovers we built, and this is Dr. Gazarz and I working on a rover. She's an engineer, so she got to really teach me all the cool engineering about building this stuff together. So she did a great job taking the lead there, and I learned a lot as a biologist from that process. Now we rise up, we go to level 2, and in level 2, that's where we do our eating, exercise, and sort of hanging out. Now, rise up the ladder here, we got our exercise, we got our weightlifting, a little ab mat, you can do some yoga on. There's Reinhold, he's pretty strong, so he can lift all the weights on that. We have that. We got our exercise bikes. Everybody's doing our VO2 max. There's Reinhold, pretty happy, probably done with the hard workout. And of course, you got Wilson there hanging out up on our ledge, just giving you a little extra encouragement in case you need it, you know. We also do exercise studies for grip strength. This is a grip strength measurement. It's one of the best overall measures of physical strength, it turns out, in exercise physiology fields. And this grip strength was actually inherited from the space shuttle. So this had been in space several times. And to show you, in case you doubt that it had been in space several times during the space station era, it only works when paired with its proper computers, in this case, Windows 2000. So, you know, it's pretty cool. You know, I got to do some real space equipment stuff. This is our little kitchen where we make our food. So you have a little microwave oven, and you keep all your food in our containers here. And this is a water dispenser that would dispense either hot or cold water that we would rehydrate our food with. Now, we weren't without, you know, good humor. If you see up here, we have our little inspirational notes. So here we have a little can of what we call Space Jam. So as you might imagine, space is very funny. And it also had some good Tabasco and Cholula, which is really good seasoning because it is exactly what they have on the space station too. So you gotta mimic everything. Now this is an example of some of our food, sort of freeze-dried. There's some really delicious freeze-dried shrimp. That's actually really good. And that was one of the best parts of the mission. The food was good. Now, we did miss pizza. That was a hard loss to suffer, but their other food was really, really good. And I can't thank them enough for making that happen. Here we got some really good peanut butter and crackers. This is Paul's first, or not first birthday. This is birthday on the first day of the mission. So his kids left him this note there. And this is Reinhold explaining how we make the food.
I'm going to show you how to make our food. So what we have here is some cornbread dressing. All of our food comes packaged in these vacuum sealed packages. So we rip it open, pull it out. There we have cornbread dressing. There's also some Russian on there if you want to learn Russian.
So this is all exact Russian space station food, so that you can share it with your Russian teammates.
We're going to attach it to this little device here, lock it in, and this needle here, shove into the package.
Fill that syringe up with water.
Pull out as much hot water as we need, and then we just push it right into the bag.
Let's fill them up.
Pull this out, pop this open, and then we knead it for a while. Get all the water dispersed into there. It's all evenly distributed in there. There you have it, cornbread stuffing. Delicious.
So that's a little bit how it was done. Reinhold did a great job with it. He was a great chef. But actually, it was the nutritional lab on JSC who makes all this food. It really was awesome. So go to space for no other reason than for the food. I probably ate better than I ate here. It was really, really good. plus I didn't have to pay for it. So kind of, you know, made a little extra perk there. So the second level is where we make that food. It's also where we hang out. A lot of good, basic. We did have free time, downtime. We got to watch Netflix. Here, Commander Hagen brought his DVDs. Him growing up in Minnesota, he's a big Minnesota Twins fan, so he brought he might kill me if I say the years wrong, but I think it was the 87 and 92 World Championship teams from Minnesota. And you can see the baseball there on our little TV screens. And here we're hanging out. We both actually had our keys handles on. It turns out we both wore the same shoes in the mission. And we got to hang out, and we do lots of psychological surveys on these iPads. So for the psychologists and sociology majors in the room, lots of surveys of our constant psychological states so we can understand these things. We had good times, had a little joke book, we had some fun together. That you can't really see too much is a picture of my dog Juno, our little greyhound puppy, kind of our window to the outside world. And it was really cool because they have all their decorations set up. This is a bumper sticker that says "Fly Me to the Moon," which is one of my grandpa's old favorite songs. So I really felt like he was there with me. You had the dog, that's Shelly's cat. You can't really see there well, but we had the cat, the dog, and it worked out pretty good. Read a lot of books. You can kind of see this here. It's kind of hidden, no pun intended, but that's actually Hidden Figures. So it's a good book about NASA history. So read a lot about that. This is up in the bunk. Read an biography about Neil Armstrong, which actually came in really helpful because we ended up flying some lunar lander simulators, which was something I got to learn about in his biography about all of his lunar lander simulators, and learn about the challenges in the Apollo program and its history. At first it wasn't very good and they had to reboot it and build everything, and it helped me to understand that we were kind of like the modern test pilots, but of the psychological systems. The way that they had to bravely test the engineering, that sometimes things didn't work. And so it reminded us that we're here to find the stuff that doesn't work, and if something doesn't work, that's okay. Because that's what we're here for. We're testing it out. And those test pilots, I got to learn a lot from in that biography. Read some Russian literature. Chekhov has a good story. If any of you guys like some good literature, there's a good story about a guy who was kept in confinement for 20 years. It's called The Bet. So good stories. Read a little bit about some jokes and all that kind of good stuff. Like I said, we had Netflix we got to watch. This is actually a documentary on Gene Cernan. If you guys don't know him, he was the last man to walk on the moon. Really interesting biography. So even in our downtime, I figured, hey, let's learn. Let's learn the history. And it actually helped to contextualize a lot of what we were doing. And it was educational. It was really cool. So, and I was also really inspired, by the way. Really good documentary. And I also did a lot of journaling. So it's a psychological study. Journaling is actually a very useful coping mechanism to stress and isolation and other types of extreme environments. And it also provides a good data source for scientists, for psychological scientists, to get an insight into your psychological state. So as a psychologist, I didn't want to neglect providing that opportunity to other people. So that was really useful. Reinhold has this picture of himself here. We kind of called him Durka. That was his nickname, and that Shelley's there. Now, part of the things that we did here was we got to also listen to podcasts. That was mine. I brought the Jocko podcast, and it helped me to kind of focus on staying stable and calm. Really focus on not letting those external factors that the mission's designed to create stressors on take you out of a good place of kind of stability, and just not overreact to those stressors and be a good team member that keeps things on. So it's kind of the stuff we're doing there. That's our level 3, our bunks. And here is our bunk. I had a picture of my lovely fiance, Erica, and there's Juno again. And it's kind of where we get to hang out, but only for about 5 hours a day, or at night, I should say. Now we arrive at the asteroid. Like I said, it starts off as a tiny little speck. As you get closer and closer and closer, it becomes really big. So that was kind of cool. So we got to have some fun. Wilson got to look at it. I pretended to carry it, and we were very excited to land on our asteroid. It's about mission day 20 or so, and this is where the real fun starts. So if you want to see some cool stuff, this is where all of our virtual reality happened. And my job as a mission specialist was to do these spacewalks, and that was freaking awesome. So I'll give you a little bit of some snapshots of what we had going on. So you put the Oculus virtual reality system on, and your controllers are a PlayStation controller. And you get all your different controls, move you all over, and you fly through the air. And this is why it was very useful to have that scuba diving experience, especially nighttime scuba diving experience, because you are in the black, and it's like going around a big coral reef, and have that kinesthetic awareness to be able to rotate and turn and do all these flips, and maintaining your kinesthetic awareness is really pretty helpful. So you come in the airlock, you set your audio, your mic to talk to the flight engineer or the pilot, which is locked in another set of the habitat, and they're guiding you remotely, kind of like an instrument flight. And of course, you got the Oculus on your eyes. She would be on the red team, I'd be on the green team. We have different objectives to work together with the pilots on achieving. Basically, going down to the asteroid, collecting geology samples, doing all sorts of cool stuff, and it would look kind of like this. So you'd be out there, and you could see your own spacecraft in the distance. That would be my teammate I could see, and she would see me over here on this other side, and you'd be floating there and moving around, and it was really a lot of fun, and it felt real. It really did, because you're just immersed in that environment for about a 2-hour operation. And now this is our craft that would deliver us. It's called the MMSEV, or Multi-Mission Space Exploration Vehicle. Now the pilots would be stationed in this, and sitting next to each other here, and they'd have one of us here and another on the other arm. So here you can see one of them is undocked. So their feet would be locked in here, they undock us, and then we go down and we fly in our jetpacks down to the different asteroid samples. So we got to do that, and this is what it looked like from the pilot's point of view. So here they are, back on their console, right? And they could see each of us out there, and they could see us traveling around the asteroid. Now they would help us by using these lasers to guide us. So they might want to put us here or here, and they'd have these beams that they could guide, and you could put a dot there or a beam there, and that would tell us where to go. So we really worked as a team. This entire thing was a huge teamwork effort. So I'd be working with Reinhold, who was my teammate on the flight engineer, and she'd be working with Commander Hagen, and I'd have to correspond and work really closely on the radios with getting vectors and planning ahead and having good communication between each other. But then some of the procedures meant I had to work with both of the different mission specialists. So we had to work together, and some of the procedures meant we both had to do a shovel at the same time or something like that together. And so it took 4 of us then to coordinate this teammate. So it really was a big teamwork element. And that is kind of a combination of flying and night scuba diving. And so you can imagine this being a night dive and this being a big coral reef. So it was a really good experience. So thank you, professors across borders. That was a really, really great grant program. And so we had that good team communication because that radio is our shared space. Now, the asteroid sample would be collected. We'd get them all in there. We'd have to dress up and put all of our sample processing equipment on, which was pretty fun. Get all dressed up, and then we sort of package it up and bring it back into the spacecraft and bring it and show it to our pilot and flight engineer who'd be working the MMSEV. So this is what they'd be looking on their screen. This could be a big solar panel. That it'd be our job to go out and explore to see if there was any tears on the solar panel, or just do sort of spacecraft maintenance. And again, a lot of teamwork. He'd say, you got to go here 20 degrees left for 100 feet up, because you can't see everything either. And a lot of good teamwork. This is kind of that flight simulator console again. You can see kind of what they would see in some of these spacecraft. And it was also used for our lunar lander research, so the LLR. So that was really cool, and this is what I referred to earlier. That biography I read of Neil Armstrong at the time was really helpful, because I got to learn about his lunar lander simulators, which didn't always work out so great. In fact, he almost died on them. And I also got to learn pretty cool. He had a connection down here, so he trained a lot up at Edwards Air Force Base, which is right over the mountains locally to here in San Bernardino. And him and his wife actually lived up in the mountains for a year or two, at first without water or electricity, which is pretty cool. So he went from that to pretty high level technology. So this is him doing that lunar lander back in the 60s, right? And he was one of the reasons he was picked for the mission was because he had more time practicing and sometimes failing in the lunar lander than anybody else on the astronaut corps. So practice makes perfect, and he just kept going and kept getting in there, even sometimes when it didn't go well. So this is what our lunar lander simulator looks like now. So this is a very common flight display that you'll see in aviation. It's called the G1000, and this is a bird's eye view showing where you are versus where you got to get to. Now Reinhold is flying the simulator on his joystick, and this is the view kind of moving forward, about to land down on the lunar surface. So we would do this all the time, and they measure our reaction times, our accuracy, and winds shaking, and we'd have to call out our fuel, because your fuel is just about empty, just like it was for Neil Armstrong's flight. I think he had about 3 seconds of fuel left. And you'd have to be consciously paying attention to that, calling this out on the radio. They record all that, and then you see how badly you keep screwing it up because you're under massive sleep deprivation as the mission goes longer and longer and longer and longer. It's pretty cool. So that's kind of what it looked like. And you can see here, he's kind of turning this way. In your landscape profiles, he's turning. And like I said, it was very useful to have that Neil Armstrong's book as I worked this lunar lander too. It was a very profound experience to think that I was at NASA doing a lunar lander while I just got done reading about how he had done that too. Particularly, reading about, this is me while I was working that lunar lander, while he was doing that, he didn't always succeed. So there's a famous crash he had at Johnson Space Center. This is him ejected out in a parachute. And when you break the video down, you can do this on YouTube, people have done it. If he would have waited 0.3 of a second longer to hit the ejection button, he wouldn't have had time to make it, he would have blown up. But he never quit, he kept going, and practice made perfect. And he made that pretty historic landing, which was pretty cool. And that's kind of what we got to do on all these simulators. So one of the other simulators we did was grabbing this SpaceX Dragon capsule, right? So this is that Falcon. How many of you guys saw the Falcon launch from SpaceX a couple weeks ago? Pretty inspiring, right? Yeah. Well, that's delivering this delivery vehicle of tons of supplies. Food, water, maybe some notes from family and friends. And you got to grab it by this big robotic arm called the Canada arm, because Canadian engineers really helped contribute to it. So this is that Canada arm. This is actually back from the shuttle days. But you can see it wrapping around, and it's going to be used to grab or grapple a hook that locks in with that delivery vehicle. Now, in space, you're traveling in orbit at 17,000 miles an hour. You miss that sucker, you might be in trouble. So it's really important that the astronauts get really good at that and don't make the mistake. So we were recording brain activity during that motor process and the cognitive process, so we can better understand how successful grapples happened and how failures occur as well. So this is what it looked like. It's called the robot, and you can see you're kind of reaching out into space, and you want to grab this resupply vehicle, and you're going to try to correspond these crosshairs to do it. And you're going to hold these controls, which are incredibly sensitive. Now, you want to kick in the pants. We're getting trained on this. And you know, the guy tells us, wonderful trainer, Vlad, from Harvard and MIT, flew down because he's the guy who built this for the astronauts and the software and everything. So he's flying down, he's training us, and he says, the astronauts get pretty good at this, but we make it easier for them. You guys have tougher control sensitivity. So he actually made it tougher on us. So we kept missing for a long time, but we did get better over time. So that was kind of cool. And this is what it would look like. You want to get that pin right in the middle of that bullseye. As you gotta zoom this arm right in there, you need to hit that. And they're measuring brain activity while that's happening. So that was just super cool. You have really sensitive controls. You have this joystick, and then you have this other joystick over here, while you have the functional near-infrared spectroscopy. Now, one thing that's really cool about this is a brain device that I had never used before as a neuroscientist. I did EEG and MRI. However, by virtue of this experience, it got me interested. So I went to Harvard and MIT this past fall and was able to learn this technique to hopefully bring it back and be able to teach students about that more here at CSUSB. Maybe we can integrate that in our lab research and stuff like that. So really trying to take what we learned from the mission and bring it back to increase offerings for you guys here. Now when we get successful, we have a good grapple. This is Commander Hagen. He was probably the best at this, and he just rocked it. I was actually probably not so good, but he did really good. And here's that EEG that I mentioned. So there's me getting it done. There's Commander Hagen. This is me working the EEG on Dr. Cazares. and it was just really cool. So for me, I did a bunch of research using EEG in undergraduate, graduate school, and of course here, working with the graduates and undergraduates. And this is exactly the same thing that we're doing here on campus. So whether it's NASA, EEG, or CSU, we were doing the same thing. You put gel into these little capsules, and you can record those brainwaves. So I thought that was really, really cool. It was also a really special experience for me because I spent 15 years doing this with all the hard work and labor that you guys are doing as students, toiling away at whatever your studies are, and all the stuff that I got trained on, like attaching this reference electrode to that. I found the people at NASA were training us to do the same thing, and I'm like, wow, it only took 15 years, but now I understand why they were trying to teach me to do this. So it really does connect. And so this is me having some fun. They even gave us an EEG t-shirt to wear. This is an EEG cap. We wear all this goopy brain wave gel, which is basically thick salt water. You record all your brain activity, and it was really, really special for me because it reminded me of all the mentors and training of the faculty and professors that had helped me to get there and inspired me to try to help you guys to get to those similar trajectories. Particularly since this is how I started back in 2002. So this is actually a screenshot from a training video I made for my lab back then, and this is must have been a sophomore or junior or so. So it's really special to see that connection there for me. Now we also did biology. We did a lot of platelet sampling. This is that mini PCR replicating DNA, growing some plants like you might remember from The Martian. And what was really cool about this was we were growing these plants and these hydroponic lights and stuff like that, and we would measure that every day like you would in our regular biology and botany classes, right? But we also had video conferences back and forth with a third grade class in schools that would allow us to actually compare how they were growing here with the elementary school class. So that was really cool. Of course, these are all the cameras and mission control showing where we are. So 24/7 reality show, right? And we have rovers, right? A lot of the engineering that we talked about, creating these little robots. And it wasn't just the engineering. This is a good point that I want to kind of emphasize, is that it's also, we got to learn the programming of the computer boards. So you build this structure, but then we had to troubleshoot errors in the computer code and open up some laptops, plug the USB connections in, and we had to troubleshoot and rewrite the code so that the rovers would work in the right way, which is how real science happens. There's problems, there's errors, and that's exactly what we do here. Certainly in my lab, we program a lot of broken code and really cool applications. So, the team did a great job when we weren't working on all that stuff. We had a lot of fun. We watched The Office a lot. So we had a lot of Dwight, a lot of Michael, a lot of good laughs. And we just had fun. A lot of nicknames and jokes and just good times. It was like being at summer camp with, the best scientists and engineers around and just having fun. So we have really good team camaraderie. These are just some fun pictures about our team really working to get along, because there's a famous saying that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And we certainly learned that and tried to exemplify that as much as we could, because we couldn't do this if we didn't have the team helping us when we each had bad days. We had to check our ego at the door and volunteer and say, hey, you know what? I'm doing a bad job today. I feel like I need your help. Can you help? Can you guys carry a little bit of that extra load? And they know that they trust that we'll carry that load for them too. What goes around will come around. So it's really, really, really good. Those teamwork skills were defining, and I can't thank them enough for helping me to learn that and see that in their examples. They really were the best team you could ask for, because we'd had a lot of fun. So we always goofed around, had a lot of fun. Here we are practicing a medical simulation, and we just couldn't stop laughing with whatever joke we had going on at the time. Reinhold and Shelley were like best friends in the mission. They just had a blast. So whenever you're tied up in a tough, tight situation, locked in, whatever's going on, man, having fun, having a good time with people makes the time pass, makes everything that's a challenge, not seeing your friends, your family, having to do work, not being able to sleep. Man, did it help to make that go better and make it go better for everyone else around us. And It's a really important part. You know, we had fun goofing around the EEG with Wilson. Reinhold and I were always dropping jokes. And I'm not very funny. All of my students will definitely vouch for that. Right, Sophie?
I have no comment.
Yeah, see, exactly, no comment. So I had to make sure, I had to bring jokes, a book, to make sure I could at least pretend to be funny whenever I needed it. And it was actually kind of cool if we had a moment of tension or everybody was kind of grumpy or you know, something at the time, we'd open up the book and we'd say, okay, so read something, okay, it was kind of funny, and it would kind of make everything light and people get along with it. So really good time. Working together in those elements was really something special to experience because that team camaraderie just made the experience together. And I really couldn't ask for better teammates, both in the mission, but also outside the mission. Mission control was absolutely incredible. I'm going to pass over some of the text here because I know we're running a little late on time. But the thing I really learned that I want to emphasize, some of the team lessons learned, is really to see all things, especially in times of stress when things aren't going well, because that's what this mission was designed to do. Create things that don't work. Create things that will be stressful, that will put conflict in people, right? See everything, no matter what it is, as opportunities instead of obligations. And what it matter what it is, even if it's something bad, this is an opportunity then to practice being patient. It's an opportunity to practice getting better. And that attitude of having that positive mental outlook makes all the difference. And I really want to use that opportunity to encourage people because that's something that we definitely learned about the importance of being humble, being kind, and seeing those opportunities. If things are really bad, maybe this is an opportunity to practice being more kind to someone. You know, you can't get out of that car on that long summer trip. Remember, you got to be kind and humble. So, you know, and I guess the other thing too is I would just say that, you know, be selfless. You know, when we find solutions instead of escapes, we can't escape here the way we can in real life. You have an interpersonal problem, find a kind, but, you know, workable solution with people. Work it out, right? When we live together well, it means having to constantly reflect on what we can do better to help the people around us, especially in times of conflict, right? Which you don't always get to practice in real life because we can get away for a few minutes. But this really helped to underscore that. If we can do all that a little bit more better on Earth, we might never want to leave it. So, really important stuff, I feel, we learned along those lines. And we would practice our emergency simulations as well, because as we said, practice makes perfect. Now, that led to a really good lesson. Practice makes perfect on our emergency simulations. They were practicing solar radiation exposure, but we really have a real emergency. So this was in August, and we got hit hard with Hurricane Harvey. Now, we didn't have comms or electronic communications with the outside world. Commander Hagen has a house in Houston with a family and a newborn and children. We were updated that there was a situation happening, that they contacted our loved ones, and we didn't have anything to worry about. But we didn't know all the details. We got called one morning. Well, first it was in the middle of the night and said, there's an emergency situation. We have tornadoes coming all around us. We're in the middle of a Class 3 hurricane. Get out of your bunks now at 3 a.m. Get downstairs and assume emergency positions for tornadoes underneath the desks. So we're down there in the middle of the night, sleep deprivation. We got about an hour to go down there. 30 minutes past, we go back up. They say, go back to bed, mission's on. We go back to bed, 8 a.m. Emergency radio goes off, says, we're in the middle of a Class 3 hurricane. Tornadoes have passed. We're in a lull right now. The mission has been aborted. We have an emergency evacuation. You have 15 minutes. Get everything of your property and belongings and equipment from the mission. Pack it up. Be outside. Emergency abort now. So we did. We stayed calm. We didn't panic. All the practicing of our emergency drills really worked out. Packed up, 15 minutes, we got out. We found a city underwater. And we would joke before going into the mission, imagine if we go into this and we come out and we're the only people left in an apocalypse.
Oh, wow.
Well, we really found an apocalyptic scene of a city underwater. So, and don't forget, I mean, Paul was one of those residents. You know, we didn't know the status of his house. And it turns out, this is how bad it was. On Friday, you can see this little stream through Houston. On Saturday, it's way up close to the bridge, and on Sunday, it's way over. That's how bad it got. But you guys all probably remember the news and the houses and the people and the devastation. We got all of our warnings on our phone when we came back out, tornado warnings. The news said 1,000 rescued, 5 dead, expected to get worse, 911 services as capacity, power outages, gators taking over the streets, prisons evacuated, dog carrying bag of food becomes hero. This was what we came out to, an apocalyptic scene of the city underwater. And our mission control support team was so incredible. They even had quarters for us to do laundry at the hotel that they found us. So they found us a safe hotel immediately, and the mission was called because as mission control was coming in to get us, their vehicles took on water and flooded on the side of the road. So it was really a heroic effort of the entire mission control team looking out for us, protecting our safety, and putting their own property, belongings, and lives at risk in order to protect us. And we were immensely and eternally grateful for them. Consummate professionals, just defined that NASA brand of excellence. And they were truly, truly the best team that we relied on. And we can't thank them enough because they got us through that. And we got out through the van. We brought our space food with us. This is all freeze-dried space food and some water. I actually had a little bit of rum I brought back from Grenada. And we were able to enjoy basically mission accomplished, safe arrival back at the hotel, and the team still stays strong. Just 2 days ago, Reinhold and I reunited. We were at NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center, which is right on the other side of the mountain up in Palmdale, and we got to do a chase car ride of this U2 space plane that flies to 70,000 feet. Incredible pilots there who invited us out, and when this lands, it lands on this single bicycle gear of tires. These little balances, they fall off at takeoff. So it's an incredible plane that comes down from 70,000 feet and has to land on the thinnest of wheels built from the 50s. And the pilots can't see, so though they have a Dodge Charger, a NASA Dodge Charger, it can only be driven by another U2 pilot who talks back and forth, just like we did on our asteroid explorations, to guide that pilot down to what he can't see. You're 2 feet, 1 feet, half a foot above, 2 degrees left, 2 degrees right, when you have crosswinds. And they expertly, the best pilots in the world, expertly bring this down, while the U2 is landing right on top of, almost, this Dodge Charger racing at 120 miles an hour. So that's what we got to do. This was 3 days ago. So the team is still strong. We're done with the mission, of course. We're very grateful for everything that went on and the safety and the protection that Mission Control afforded us, as well as the honor and the privilege of being able to contribute to the mission. But we're continuing on. Those bonds of teamwork that was forged, those lessons that we learned, the struggles that we went through, they're still going strong. And I can't thank these guys enough. It was absolutely incredible. We're still chasing our dreams. We're still chasing these U2 space planes. And so I want to encourage you guys that the future is yours. Here at CSUSB, we say, we define the future. Well, you guys are that future. And, those dreams for Mars, they start as dreams, but you move into simulations. You do the science, and you achieve that. You go through this process, dream, imagine, believe, right? Work through these simulations. Start as a cartoon, but work to simulate it, practice it, and then we have, that's how you get to that achievement. That's how you get to these rockets. You have to simulate that. That's in class. That's in research. And so imagine, simulate, do it. It was a pretty humbling experience because when I sat in that building with the rocket ship and I reflected on how amazing it was, because I used to dream of that as a kid. And now I was actually there, able to touch it, being asked to live in a rocket ship. And this is the Saturn V that's in here, from what blasted off the Apollo missions. To be able to move from a dream to actually believing in yourself when better people stop believing in themselves. And you find yourself moving past, people who are way smarter, way faster, way stronger. Was a pretty humbling experience, and I'm very, very grateful for it. And I want to be able to share that and encourage you guys to that same message. Because that's the inside of that building. To be able to have that experience and see that you're there next to that rocket that you used to dream about as a small boy. To think about the only reason I was there was because I hadn't given up. And I believed in myself when it seemed absurd to believe that that was possible. through decades and years of very, very hard work. And I know you guys are here doing that same hard work. You guys have your dreams. You guys have your goals and ambitions, and they can be achieved through that same process. And we're all here as a faculty, of course, to support you guys in that. We want to see you do that. So, this is a message I made for you guys here at San Bernardino.
Hey guys, it's Dr.
But, I
Addante.
wasn't forgetting
I'm
about you.
sorry that I'm unable to be there on the first couple days of class. I've been detained, and in fact detained for 45 days, locked up in a simulated space capsule on a simulated mission to an asteroid. And we're down here at NASA Johnson Space Center on something called the HERA mission. So HERA stands for Human Exploration Research Analogs. And I know I'm scheduled to be there for you guys this fall. I will be there just a little bit late, maybe a week or so. You're in fantastic hands.
Before the hurricane came, I thought I was going to be late to class.
My best, but I wanted to send you my best and let you know that we will be going full tilt once we get back. We're going to have a lot of fun this semester. We've got some really cool stuff to learn about biological psychology. Hopefully you guys are all excited to be beginning your master's degree programs. I'm excited to be there and share that time with you. We're going to learn all sorts of cool stuff about the mind, the brain, behavior, and the biological bases for that. We'll cover some learning and memory. We'll cover some brainwave activity, just like we get to record here, and get to have a smorgasbord of science in our class as much as we do here at HERA. And I want to wish you well, let you know that you're definitely on the radar. We'll be seeing you guys soon, but not forgotten you guys, representing you guys in Cal State, San Bernardino. We got the Coyotes going, so you're on my mind. See you soon. Keep up with the assignments. The syllabus is accurate, and it is expected to be read and ready to go. And I can't wait to see you guys. Have a great fall. Welcome to Cal State.
So that was the message. I was thinking about you guys in the mission. Of course, I thought I'd miss class, but unfortunately for you guys, for the students, I was able to get here on time. But we have that, because you guys do define the future, and we are here to help you guys be that future. And so with that, I'll kind of leave it by thanking you guys for your time, thanking the Pfau Library, Patricia, Robbie Madrigal. Thank you guys so much for helping to put this opportunity together for everyone here. Thank the HERA teammates, Shelley, Reinhold, Paul, Rob, fantastic people. I couldn't have learned more from a better group of people. Even the teammate I had to replace, he was sad when it happened. He was devastated, right? But I learned so much from him. He kept a positive attitude even then. We went out for dinner, and he was laughing. He was thinking of the good things that he learned and was helping to still support us. And I was so humble, and we all were, because the kindest, gentlest person you can imagine. And if he can keep that positive attitude in that situation, how much better can we do, right? It was very, very humbling. So I can't thank these teammates enough. Mission Control, Patrice Yarbrough is the PI for the program, leads everything. Manages an incredible crew. Yvonne manages all of that with aplomb. Daniel, Tiffany, Kim Seaton, Lisa, KBR Wiley, all these people just did incredible, world-class jobs, because this wasn't a fake mission. This was a real emergency. They helped keep us safe, at risk to themselves. They did a fantastic job. My mentors in school, Andy Linus, Matt Winland, Dean Neely is the U2 pilot at NASA Armstrong right up the way, gave us those great opportunities to chase our dreams by chasing those planes a few days ago. The diversity program in neuroscience, the American Psychological Association helped fund and support my research and education, so thank you to them. Of course, the students here at CSUSB in the lab, Lindsay Sirianni, Alana Muller, Rose DeCock, Celine Gonzalez, were very patient in dealing with me being absent and locked up during this time, so thank you ladies for your patience and hard work keeping the laboratory going. And of course, everyone here at CSUSB, the psychology department, Dean Mohammed, Department Chair Rico, everybody else, and of course, the entire San Bernardino community. Thank you guys for coming here today, your time, your patience. I know we took a little bit longer than anticipated, but thank you guys for your patience, and for those who helped support the people of Houston who were devastated by that hurricane. I saw with my own eyes that devastation, houses gone, lives upturned, and it seems far away from us now, both in time and geography, but the contributions that the people across the country and out here made towards that makes a real difference for real lives. So with that, I'll have to, of course, thank Gino and Erica. I don't know if I mention that, but, thank you from our team. Thank you, CSUSB. Dream big, guys. This may be the end for my presentation, but hopefully the beginning for you guys, because here at Cal State, you guys are indeed the future. So with that, I will kind of conclude and say thank you. So I don't know if we have time for questions in this room, but if they happen to have other things going on, I'm here at your service all day. I'll go right outside the other room. We'll talk. We'll answer questions. Whatever you guys want to do, whatever works at the library's discretion.
Yeah, there's a panel discussion at 2, and we're going to set up the Zoom. So maybe we could, other questions we can do in the corner right now?
Yeah. And you guys are welcome to come up here, by the way. You can see our mission patches and boxes and the thing from the cosmonauts and a bunch of other patches and all sorts of good stuff.
I recently had an experience, so you were actually in this building.
Yeah, oh, I was there, that's so cool. Isn't it amazing? Oh my gosh,
So I
yeah.
had, and I went and I got to see
Oh, mission control?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for sharing your experience and being so honest about, the whole process. Are you available? I'd like to know more about the research.
Sure. I do. Yeah, usually it's Wednesday mornings at 10, but otherwise it's just an appointment. Just send me an email. We'll make whatever.
I can actually look up your
You can have these if you want. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'll look your email online. Thank you
Yeah,
so
it's
much.
Richard.Addante@CSUSB. Here, you know what? I have a card here. It was,
Actually, that'll stay after the camera.
whatever. On the AKs, ingress and egress and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. I really did have
That's okay.
the business cards around.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, sure.
The black one or are you gonna sign it?
That's better.
There's another sign sheet over here.
Yeah, sure.
I live for you think that'll work?
Yeah.
Give
Give it a shot. If not, I got it back.
Yeah, there's a panel discussion right now.
Stop asking questions.
So that'll
Three long days. 17:45. Yeah.
Yeah, 45.
We'll make one for
Not there's an adjustment period. You're really, 22 days, remember, I mean, I don't know, maybe your first week in grad school, when you're done, you see it's like it's been a month. And your first month feels like you've been here a year. So you're in such a good situation that it felt like you were there for 6 months. So it did take some years to compression. I mean, you're under just intentional stress. So,
about here.
yeah, it was a little bit.
Would they bring the same team back?
No, because we know too much about the study now, because they debriefed us and told
Yeah,
us
just
about
get
all
the tripod out.
inside stuff that they were looking to test. And yeah, that's why we don't really talk about it.
This was great.
Well, thank you guys so much for your patience.
What did you learn about the sleep deprivation?
I learned that none of us are superhuman. So, see, that's a really good question. Hey, thanks for helping set up the Zoom. We all report on our surveys every day. How you doing? How you feel? You're great. You're doing awesome. You know, we tried to check it out, but we couldn't do it. And you don't want to show weakness, right? We're good. We started measuring, we saw landing and so what did I learn? Like, as much as you try to do it, I mean, it's sleep is so Is it HERA? Is it HERA? I used to squeeze for the camera.
I'm gonna talk to you in a second. Right?
Yeah. We were all high up.
Yeah.
I learned that
Officially, that's so weird. That's what I was thinking because so many people try to like sleep 1 hour less and do this like. Look at that. I don't think we're doing. Yeah. Everyone didn't hear about this experience and never heard about this program. I've been there before. I've never heard now actually. Doing the same thing.
I know I can find you another one.
I would love to.
It should be fine. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
I don't have the pictures. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a patch and stuff.
I'm gonna sing their song.
Well, I tell you, working here, I get inspired by the stuff you guys do. I mean, the students here, you guys are inspiring. It makes it wow. No problem. What's your name? Jeffrey. Jeffrey. It was great meeting you, man. Thank you for coming.
D-A or D-I-A.
Yeah. Come check it out, man. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. Oh, we were talking about that. Very interesting.
Okay, so besides in your class, well, what's made you want to here? So you like this is the or anything else you like? Are you still listening? Are you still